The horrific news, of course, from the Middle East. Aid organisations, charities and NGOs are trying to find ways of bringing hope, but also bringing peace and diplomacy back to the region. And joining us now is Senior Crisis Advisor for Amnesty International, Donatella Rivera. Thanks very much for being with us in the programme. I know you're currently looking into all sorts of different aspects of this conflict, but your main take from what I'm seeing at the moment is that this evacuation order from Israel for Gaza should be rescinded immediately. Why do you say that?
Yes, Gaza is one of the most densely populated regions in the world, and the order given by Israeli forces to half of the population of Gaza, those who live in the north of the Gaza Strip, to move to the south of the Gaza Strip is simply, it's impossible to implement, because it's just not possible for that number of people to move to the south. The conditions in the Gaza Strips are already absolutely dire at the best of time. They are absolutely desperate now since the 7th of October, since the Israeli military operation has been ongoing. Every single corner of the territory of Gaza has been bombarded, and those bombardments continue. They've wiped out entire family, killed thousands of people, most of whom are civilians. Hundreds and hundreds of them are children. So the accommodation, the infrastructure situation is absolutely desperate. It's impossible for people to move to places where they have nowhere to stay. People are sleeping on the open ground.
How do you think Israel should respond, though? If I could just interrupt you, how do you think Israel should respond? I mean, let's not forget, nearly 2 weeks ago, Hamas slaughtered innocent Israeli families. Israeli hostages, of course, are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. They can't just ignore that, can they?
It's not a question of ignoring. It's simply a question that not in war, not even in war, everything is allowed. There are laws. International humanitarian law is there and has to be respected by all parties. The fact that Hamas militants have carried out attacks that killed hundreds and hundreds of Israeli civilians and have abducted Israeli civilians, that does not give Israel carte blanche to kill thousands of Palestinians, civilians, which is what has been happening since the 7th of October.
In what other way, though, could they combat Hamas? In what other way could Israel combat Hamas?
Well, certainly not by targeting civilians and by carrying out indiscriminate attacks against civilians. Obviously, legitimate military targets can be engaged, but not the civilians. That's the whole different. That is a cornerstone of international humanitarian law, distinguishing between legitimate military target, military objectives, and civilians. 700 children are not responsible for the crimes of Hamas. Ordinary Palestinian civilians who cannot leave the Gaza Strip, who have been subjected to a blockade imposed by Israel since the past 16 years. They cannot leave. They have nowhere else to go.
There is some hope now, isn't there? Because there is some hope in that aid, we hope anyway, is now going to start getting into Gaza through Egypt.
Obviously, any humanitarian aid that can get into the Gaza Strip is a good thing, because the civilian population is living in absolutely dire condition. There is so much that they need that is no longer available already. People are drinking contaminated water because the lack of electricity, the lack of fuel that allows generators to function, makes it impossible for the water authorities to deliver water, clean, drinkable water to the population. Hospitals are missing equipment and medicines at the time when the needs are the most acute, because thousands of people have been injured in the past 12 days. So any humanitarian aid that gets into the Gaza Strip will be welcome, of course, but that is not enough. Of course, the most important thing is for the bombardments that are killing and injuring people, that are wiping out entire families and destroying entire streets and neighborhood every day. Those must stop.
I know you're also concerned about the potential use of phosphorus bombs by Israel. I mean, do you think they've been used at this stage?
We know that Israeli forces have used white phosphorus.
Because some experts say it may not have been white phosphorus, do they? Some people say it may have been thermite, which is shells that causes a smoke screen that looks very much like white phosphorus.
What our evidence lab has been able to verify, both on the Israeli side, where Israeli forces were positioned near Sderot, the artillery shells that were at the ready are white phosphorus that we verified, and on the Gaza side, we verified videos that show what very much looks like white phosphorus being airbursted over two areas of the Gaza city, the Harbor and the Zaytun neighborhood. And of course, Israel, we know and we verified, used white phosphorus in a densely populated area of the Gaza Strip in previous conflicts with disastrous consequences. So we are urging Israel not to use white phosphorus. Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. It's full of civilians, and the use of white phosphorus in that manner puts civilians in danger and should not be used.
I know you're also concerned about France banning pro-Palestinian demonstrations. I mean, the problem with that is, of course, well, for a start, they could become violent, but also there's that fear, isn't it, that it could inevitably attract some demonstrators who could be using hate speech, anti-Semitic speech at those kind of events.
Once again, it's a question of responding to event in a manner that is proportionate, that does not impose unnecessary restrictions in the case of protest, and that does not impose a collective measure which is not justified by the law. And this is the situation when it comes to imposing a blanket ban on demonstrations, because obviously the right to demonstrate peacefully should not be curtailed, should not be restricted. The fact that people should not be allowed to engage in hate speech is one thing, and a blanket ban on all demonstration, on non-violent demonstration, is another thing, and that is what is disproportionate.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks very much for joining us. That's Donatella Rivera, Senior Crisis Advisor for Amnesty International. Thanks.
Thank you.